Things that we use and see which are normal now, but will be creepy, unsettling 50 years in the future. Story 1. How we treat cancer patients. We eliminate the cancerous tissue a fraction faster than we eliminate the patient. If we get the cancer, the patient is then worked back from the brink of passing. Answer. I saw on TV that Australian researchers have come up with something to help that. They inject the patient while getting chemo, and it somehow forms a protein barrier around the, whatever you call it, good cells to protect them from the chemo, resulting a far better immune system. So far only trialing on animals, I think 2020 as earliest can be used on humans. Story 2. Kind of hoping the amount of shoot we just throw in the ocean without really doing anything about it will be seen as unsettling. Story 3. Everything that's going on in North Korea right now. Looking at it from today's perspective, it's a complicated situation with no way to really win for anybody. Looking back, all people will see is millions in poverty under totalitarian rule and the fact that we all just watched it happen. Answer. Because we can't do much about it. If the US invade, it will be a costly war. They have a lot of military presence and technology. Plus, average citizens will defend their country because of powerful propaganda and they don't know about the outside world. Plus, the only ally of North Korea is China, and that will escalate tensions with the US and China. Story 4. Think about all of the user-submitted amateur adult content out there. Now think about the fact that the grandkids of these people will probably see it. Story 5. I've been thinking that solely watching videos from YouTube that are from today will be somewhat unsettling to watch in 50 years from now. Story 6. Pre-existing conditions within health insurance policies. My fiancée is a diabetic. If she doesn't have her insulin, she dies. It's that simple. I already made it a point to let her know that I would never allow that to happen. I would sell a kidney before anything drastic happens. But health insurance companies certainly don't mind making it difficult for us. Despite having health insurance from her employer, there is a pre-existing condition policy implemented, barring the coverage of her diabetic needs. Why the mother of fudge should my fiancé have to buy into a health insurance policy for an entire year before her insulin and other diabetic needs are covered? It's a cruel practice that is implemented for the financial benefit of the health insurance company. Answer. I imagine that in the future, the American system of healthcare will be looked back on by Americans the way it is looked at in the present by the residents of countries with free universal healthcare. If I lived in the United States, earning an equivalent of what I earn in the UK, I simply would not be able to afford healthcare. I would have to chance it. That idea is just diabolical to me, and I imagine to a large number of other people who live in countries where healthcare is free. Story 7. The idea that desperate people might pay all their life savings, hand over their passports, get in a leaky boat and try to cross a dangerous sea just to get to a place where they hope they might find peace. Then that place tows their boat back out to sea and leaves them there. The ones who do manage to get to past get thrown in prison. I'm referring to Australia's treatment of asylum seekers, but to this applies to any developed country's treatment of asylum seekers. Obviously, it's not a black and white issue, but I firmly believe that our grandchildren will be demanding to know why we weren't more merciful. Answer. I'm referring to Australia's treatment of asylum seekers. If you're a pretty blonde American teenager, the Australian government will spare no expense in rescuing your jerk, though. It cost $300,000 to rescue Abby Sunderland, whose boat capsized 4,000 miles from Perth. Failed teen solo sailor Abby Sunderland's team did not put a cent towards her rescue, but still tried to get the public to pay for the boat's salvage. Story 8. The anti-vaccine movement. Most people already find it unsettling now. Think of future kids learning of the time when preventable diseases sprung back up because people refused to take measures against them, especially with the fact that they're doing this to their kids. Story 9. College. When you turn 18, your parents send you off to a podunk town where you can drink and party with other teenagers for 4 years. While you learn about the intricacies of beer pong ultimate frisbee, your critical thinking skills will stagnate. Only 35 of adults found what they learned in college applicable to their actual job. I foresee us eventually returning to the apprenticeship system where we learn on the job. Answer: it is pretty much a bastardized mix of both right now. Have a degree but no experience? Great. You're shoot out of luck for a job then. A whole lot of experience but no degree. Fantastic. Here is a job, but you are making half as much as if you had a degree. You have to do a combo of paying out your jerk for a degree, as well as working your jerk off in an internship co-op, being lucky enough to find something in your field, and companies are lining up to pay you nothing to do all that work while you sink into debt. Story 10. How we actively fought against a better future because it was better for business to fight change. Edit. Oh, and that we have privately run prisons in the U.S. Story 11. How the LGBT community is treated. I think in 50 years' time, people will look at the people against reform and wonder how the hell that was ever an issue. Answer: gonna have to question if this happens TBH. It depends a lot on the rates that our society is evolving. The fact that homosexuality exists from the moment humanity existed, and yes, many things have changed, but the pace is really slow, I believe, makes me think that 50 years are not enough for a drastic change. Edit. Spelling, edit 2. My opinion sums up the overall cultural evolution of the globe, not just a specific place country. If you judge only from your POV place of living, please consider the cultural variations. Story 12. Unsustainable practices for the sake of profit margins. The profit of a single lifetime in exchange for generations of suffering. Sadly, the world has always been this way, but until people start acting as a collective and less like individuals, we'll be going down this unsustainable road for a very long time. Story 13. I think braces will be seen as completely barbaric in the future. All that metal in your mouth, slicing up your cheeks. Story 14. When we realize that what we upload onto the internet, especially Facebook, will be harder and harder to remove. At some level, it will be impossible, and with Photoshop, everyone can be framed. Story 15. The goddamn people suffering in the streets under the shadow of million-dollar apartments. People who have sold everything they have, next to people who earn more interest in a day than they poor people do in a lifetime. We have enough food to feed everyone, we just don't. Rather food spoil than feed the unemployed. It is sickening today. I can't imagine what the future will say about it. Story 16. Toilet paper. One day we will be using the 3 seashells and we will wonder why ever wiped poo from our bum with our hand onto paper. Story 17. Those shorts that teenage girls wear, which are extremely high, party too hard, but are almost inside of them. Story 18. Hopefully, our big banking money operating corporations. There would be documentaries juxtaposing their commercials, a business you can trust, to a few years later when they get busted milking their customers for every penny they have, sending thousands into poverty. They would show it to a bunch of young high schoolers, and a kid will raise their hand. Teacher, did businesses really get away with ruining people's lives like that? Why did nobody stand up to them? Then the teacher will lean on her elbow, staring out the window, remembering just how she got into her profession of education. Answer: as she stares at the billboard plastered to the side of the gymnasium, advertising some Yumco product with a line of vending machines underneath it, distributing every type of processed food under the sun. Then she will turn to her students, who all have a 300 textbook in front of them, and remind them that they go to Bank of America High School, and that these banks let the people survive under these terrible recessionary conditions. That without the financing that these glorious banks provided, there would be no poverty to sink into, only absolute homelessness. Then as she turns on her Sony TV with a Sony Blu-ray player to play the day's lessons, she will shrug and try to think of when the world went so wrong. Story 19. Allowing the frail, chronically ill, extreme elderly, etc. receive aggressive critical care in a hospital when the chances of survival are very low. It wastes resources, is tortuous to the patient, and only serves the interest of the family that cannot let them go. Story 20. How bad reality TV and celebrity worship culture got in this period. It's eaten most of the TV, the web, and Twitter. It's completely out of control, yet not too many people seem bothered by it. This period will be remembered as the reality TV years full of asinine stars who did nothing but stupid things on camera for the love of adoration of millions. Not to mention how this culture holds up the worst type of person, the selfish, ignorant drama queen, as our pop heroes. It used to be celebrities had talent or something to offer. Now it's just being catty with other catty people and showing us the worst of humanity. They'll also look back and see the agents against democracy and liberal values the way we see Stalin or Hitler today. Those who fought against the Arab Spring, Russia, etc., will be seen as the real villains of our age. Assad's regime gassing thousands of innocent civilians, including hundreds of children, barely 70 years after Hitler will be a low point in these modern times, especially when the nations of the earth sat back and let him do it. They'll wonder how we tolerated dictators like Assad, Putin, Gaddafi, etc., as dictatorships will be less common in the future. The 40-hour work week will be looked upon by bewildered faces. What did people do so long at work? How did they manage to have any free time? The post-industrial, post-computer age economy we're living in is still built on the factory idea of 40 hours of work. This idea is already falling apart, and I imagine will be dead in 50 years. The age of information insecurity we live in. The unregulated market of software has led to this Rube Goldberg-like existence for all of us, which allows hackers to trivially break into most systems. Things like running only signed code, downloading only vetted. Software from app stores, not having root access, etc. will be the norm. OSs and software will move towards being built on non-C roots, and towards languages that make buffer overflows and other common exploitable errors difficult or impossible to accidentally implement. The Wild West mentality of the IT world just isn't sustainable, and people will wonder how we manage to get all these viruses and have all these problems. Answer: not to mention how this culture holds up the worst type of person, the selfish, ignorant drama queen, as our pop heroes. Really? The Kardashians' Jersey Shore cast members are almost universally reviled on the internet. People mock these shows with their friends, not hold up Snooki and The Situation as ideals to be emulated. It's completely out of control, yet not too many people seem bothered by it. Reality TV is like junk food. Everyone admits it's bad for them, but we still indulge anyways. That's why we call it dislike watching. Story 21. Animal farming and slaughterhouses. We can grow pure protein or even textured muscle now. It's just very expensive. When it soon becomes cheaper than raising and caring for animals just for their meat, we'll move towards vat-grown meat only, and at some point the thought of slaughtering animals for meat will become creepy and unsettling to the majority. People risking their lives in vehicles, planes, trains, and automobiles with a human in control. Humans cause more accidents than they prevent across all modes of transport, and we have the power right now to replace them in planes and trains. And cars, buses, lorries are only held up by the fact they would have to share the busy roads with human-controlled vehicles. There will come a tipping point where self-driving vehicles become the norm, and then people will look back and be unsettled by the fact we used to let 17-year-olds control 2 tons of metal traveling at 60-70 mph in the close vicinity of pedestrians and other road users. Story 22. Gastric bypass surgery. I would think in the future, people would marvel at the idea that someone ate so much that it affected their life to the point where they had to have their stomach clamped to save them. It sounds barbaric. Story 23. Botox. Paralyzing facial nerves with injections of botulism toxin for cosmetic reasons. That is up there with swallowing lead pills to aid in digestion. Story 24. Helium balloons. When Earth's helium supply is significantly lowered and helium balloons become significantly expensive, no one will appreciate how fun it was as a small child to ingest large amounts of gaseous helium kept inside huge latex balloons in order to make yourself sound like an infantile chipmunk for a few precious seconds. Story 25. How much meat we eat. Okay, maybe we will produce it in factories in 50 years instead in animals. But the way we are producing it right now is a major problem to the environment of this planet. Everyone knows it, nobody cares. Edit. And that being said, I'll go and make myself a ground pork bun. Story 26. Most medicine for incurable or life-threatening conditions. My doctors give me steroids and immunosuppressants when what I really need are some newly grown organs and gene therapy. I can't even begin to describe cancer treatment, and I've only seen people go through it. I have no idea what that feels like. Jesus Christ. Story 27. Going to a central building to work for 40 hours a week. In 20 or 30 years, we'll all work from home for around 2 hours a day. All production and other menial tasks will be automated. Since goods will become almost value, less we will earn money for luxuries through creation of ideas, works of the arts, and service to others. Basic necessities will be provided free. Clothing, food and water, shelter and medical care, education. You only pay for it if you want something nicer. www.futuretimeline.net. Take all of that with a dash of salt, though. While technology can be predicted, humanity cannot. Story 28. Taking a shoot. Imagine one system that does everything for you perfectly. You won't have to wash your hands. Story 29. How there is global warming and bees dying, but we were too busy taking pictures of our own faces and how a barista spelled our names wrong on our coffee cups. Story 30. Not creepy, but a little unsettling. Litter. I think we'll look back at how our generation and the one before us has just plundered the earth of its natural resources then, after briefly using them. Just throw it in a huge pile or in the ocean, or on the side of the road, never to be used again. Story 31. I think the way children aren't allowed out and about because of child predators is going to be a weird one. Hell, it'd be weird if you tried to explain it to any generation previously. Unless, of course, kids growing up now think it's normal and pass it on to their kids, so that becomes the norm. But I hope not, as I'd feel bad for the future childhoods of humanity. Story 32. Probably organ transplants. Waiting for someone today and transplanting organs into another person will seem weird because they are already at the brink of being able to 3D print organs using stem cells that are a complete genetic match. Story 33. Wait a sec. So people just harassed each other on the internet all the time, and they almost always got away with it? Online anonymity sounds terrible. Story 34. Gaps in public restroom stalls big enough to easily see who is in there and what number they're doing. Story 35. When we look back at the ingredients in our processed foods, we'll wonder why we were so dumb to eat it. Story 36. People having parades because of their intimacy orientation. Nobody cares who you're fudge, like, at all. I'm positive those will be mostly gone in 50 years. Story 37. People feeling that they have to conform to gender roles. Fine. There may have been an evolutionary advantage in thinking of gender as binary, but it's very clear that many people feel naturally uncomfortable with identifying as male or female, and it makes much more sense when treated as a spectrum, just like intimacy orientation, which in itself isn't as simple as L, G, or B. Story 38. Psychology by psychiatry. We still use ECT and Prozac, really? There's primitive science for you. We're going to look back and realize how naive we were to think we could actually comprehend the complexity of the human brain and emotions at this time, much less give rules to them. If psychologists really had confidence in their abilities, behavioral predictions, and diagnoses, they'd work in marketing, not medicine. Story 39. Fighting and eliminate each other over billions-year-old decayed fossils so that we can keep our vehicles moving, which creates mass pollution, when there are thousands of cleaner sources of energy around us. Story 40. Driving cars ourselves. Hopefully, self-driving cars will become the norm at some point before we all die, and kids who grow up with it will wonder how we trusted ourselves to operate these vehicles of mass destruction. Story 41. Hopefully, our attitude about intimacy consent being sort of unnecessary as long as the person doesn't scream no and punch you in the face. Ask. Story 42. Clothes. In the future, people will have a lot less clothes, less cover for the don't touch me there spots. Story 43. Well, this question really depends on the future, doesn't it? I would like to think that in 50 years, people will be unsettled by the notion that people died of certain curable illnesses simply because they didn't have the right health care. On the other hand, it might be stuff like having a bath or driving a car that maximizes performance over efficiency. Story 44. The Pledge of Allegiance. It's scary how much people automatically stand up and recite the pledge every single morning. Oftentimes, I'll be the only one sitting down at this moment. Story 45. Consuming bovine growth milk. That shoot is so bad for you, I can't even understand why it's still being widely marketed. Story 46. Monogamy. The concept will seem as antiquated as working for the same company for 50 years and getting that gold watch at your retirement party does today. Relationships will become like jobs. You'll keep your eye on the marketplace and always look for a chance to move up instead of stagnating in your current position.